Hello everyone and welcome to the Polymath Project. This is your host Siva. Today's conversation is between me and a dear friend of mine, Jakub Tomas. We dive into a multitude of ideas related to Friedrich Nietzsche. For those of you who haven't heard of him, Friedrich Nietzsche was a 19th century German philosopher. He was known for his fiery statements like God is dead and we have killed him. In today's discussion, he remains the center of our discussion while we talk about his ideas. I would like to add that Jakub is one of the nicest people I know, and I love talking to him both on and off the camera. Hello, man. First of all, how are you?
Hello there. Yeah, I'm fine. It's been a busy week working and everything, studying. But yeah, I'm fine. How about you?
A bit nervous, but
I
quite
can see
right.
that. Yeah, I'm a bit nervous too, but no worries.
Yeah, so first of all, would you like to tell a bit about yourself so that the listeners can know like whom you are and what are we doing here today?
Yeah, absolutely. So for all the listeners, hello there. I hope you are having a nice day. My name is Jakub Tomas. I'm from Czech Republic, and I'm currently studying on the Faculty of Humanities at Charles University in Prague. I'm studying philosophy. To be more specific, I'm studying French and German philosophy, and my specialization is in Friedrich Nietzsche, who is like this well-known, or at least in here in Europe, he's a well-known author and philologist and mainly philosopher. And I study his work. Yeah, I am currently working on some articles, and I think we can talk about them later on when we get a bit more into it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So let's just get into it then.
Sure, let's go.
So first of all, how do I pronounce his name? The one that we are talking about, that is Friedrich Nietzsche. So it is Nietzsche, I don't know. So you tell
Yeah,
me.
it's quite hard to pronounce with all those letters in it. It's Nietzsche. Like you were talking about your knee, and then you were saying the first part of chair. So Nietzsche. Yeah. His full name is
Okay.
Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche.
Hmm.
It's
Okay.
interesting that
So
he even had a middle name because he was born on a birthday of German emperor in that time who was called Friedrich Wilhelm. So he got that name after him.
interesting. I did not know that.
Ah, the more you know. Yeah.
Okay. So since we have gotten the name figured out, let's start with who he is and why is he so relevant even after more than 100 years of his death.
Yeah, well, to keep it simple, Nietzsche was, and we can even say that he wasn't, one of the greatest philosophers of his and of modern time. But yes, we can ask why is that so? That this German who, for example, denounced the German nation, ordered Pope in Vatican to be shot, proclaimed that God is dead, among other things, and spent most of his time either sick or writing his book, staying in the Swiss Alps or in northern Italy. Why is he so well known and appreciated nowadays? That's a bit of a rhetorical question. Yeah. Uh, I can say a bit about his life. As I was saying, he was born in Germany, in German Reich, we can say, in 1844. He was born to a Protestant family, to a Protestant pastor, Karl Ludwig, and yeah, that was his father. Unfortunately, when Nietzsche was 4 years old, his smaller brother, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, and his father, Karl Ludwig, both died. Nowadays, we reckon that their death was caused by a genetical disease about which we can talk later. And Nietzsche and his younger sister Elizabeth Nietzsche, they both apparently also had it. When Nietzsche was young, uh, he visited what we would call elementary school today. He was apparently a very orderly and obedient young boy, which is interesting regarding his legacy as the destroyer of Christianity, of values and everything. From his young years, he then studied in university in Basel, and he studied philology. So he didn't start as a philosopher. He started as a philologist, which is also interesting, and we can talk about it later. He received an honorary professorship, and to this day he is among the youngest classics professors from University of Basel. When there was war, a Franco-Prussian war, he served in the military as a member of medical personnel. He contracted the dysentery there and had to be treated, so he had to be taken off the active duty for some time. But it was during this time when he began writing his first, and we could say, true book, The Birth of Tragedy, which was about philology and about ancient Greek. But it wasn't really appreciated by philology scholars at that time. It was met with kind of mixed feelings. It also temporarily damaged Nietzsche's reputation and attendance at his lectures, but it quickly came back. So it was like mixed, and to this day, it is being said that people stopped visiting his lectures, but it was only for like a few weeks, a few months, and then it again moved back to normal, and he was quite liked by younger scholars for this work. The same cannot be said about Nietzsche's views on academic space, and he grew quite distant to it. So much so that he left Basel, also due to his illness. He got a pension, academic pension, and then he began his philosophical journey. I should also note that in this time he became good friends with music composer Richard Wagner, and his wife Cosima Wagner, despite their almost 30-year difference between them. Nietzsche, when he was younger, he used to like romanticism as in the culture, as the arts and everything, and romantic ideas, of which Wagner was a strong proponent. But Nietzsche's interest in romanticism didn't last, as well as their friendship with Wagner, and it broke down, which was quite a toll on young Nietzsche and on Wagner also. After this, Nietzsche moved to Swiss Alps. He used to move between various places, specifically between a beautiful village of Sils Maria in Engadin, not far from St. Moritz, in Italian and other Italian cities, such as Genoa, Rapallo, Turin, and some French cities also, for example, Nice. And it was in those Swiss Alps when he wrote most of his books, for example, Human, All Too Human, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and others up to his last ones, like The Genealogy of Morals and The Twilight of the Idols. It was also here where he suffered the most from his disease. As I said before, he was ill from young age, and there is a rumor that he contracted syphilis during his military service. However, that rumor is false, and it was probably spread by Wagner's after the breaking of their friendship. And as I said, Nietzsche's brother and father died from this disease, and Nietzsche and his sister had this disease from a very young age, so the probability of syphilis can be kind of ruled out. Some recent research implies that it was a disease that is called CADASIL, that is spelled CADASIL, and it's kind of strange. It is a type of hereditary stroke disorder. It causes a lot of migraines, really strong migraines that prohibited Nietzsche from anything other, we can say, than lying in bed and feeling awful, vomiting. It also caused Nietzsche to temporarily lose his sight. So he couldn't see, couldn't write. It was a bad time of his life. But when he wasn't feeling as sick, he dedicated a lot of his time to tracking his health, and that's what dedicated to watching to what caused these episodes of illness, and try to somewhat limit them by trying out various diets and moving between the seasons of the years between different cities in accordance to where he felt best. Unfortunately, this disease also led to him having a stroke in 1889, after which he went mad and had to be stationed at the psychiatric sanatorium. He never recovered from this, apart from brief moments of clarity, and he then died in 1900. That was a short summary of his life, and there is a lot more to him than we can possibly go over in this podcast. I hope that I said everything important that I had to.
You mentioned that he's famously said or stated that God is dead. So
Yeah.
what does that mean? Because it is really cryptic for me as an outsider. So
Yeah,
what does this mean, and what does God signify for him?
Yeah, before I directly answer your question, I just want to point out that this is probably the most well-known quote from Nietzsche, or one of his most famous teachings, that God is dead. It is actually well known in popular culture nowadays. It is being put on shirts, it is in textbooks, in schools, in literature, and interesting, funny little thing is that it even if featured as a main quote in a series on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it or heard of it. Philomena's Skunk on Earth.
Yeah, I've not seen it.
Yeah, one of the last episodes is fully dedicated to this idea. They, I think, even mention Nietzsche. I don't really want. I watched it like once, but it was funny. It was interesting. That's all I'm gonna say. So, it is quite interesting, this quote. For many people, as you've said, it can be quite strange, mainly for outsiders. What is this God? Why is he dead? Or why has Nietzsche proclaimed so and so? I think that a lot of people are quite distressed by this statement, mainly due to their beliefs and religiosity. I know that at the time when he proclaimed so, even today among Christian groups, it is quite a statement that God is dead. I myself live in one of, if not the most atheistic countries in the world, Czech Republic, and so I don't find this quote that much strange. But I know that a lot of believers and faithful people do. So, what does it mean? Bit of a background. The first mention of this quote is in Nietzsche's book Die Frohliche Wissenschaft. That's the German name. In English, it is the joyful science or the gay science. It is not a perfect translation from German. There are some problems with it, but we don't need to discuss that now. It is there is a lot of passages, at least 4 I can think of right now, where he discusses this death of God. And it's really interesting. He discusses it not in a way that there is one God that just died, like we can think of in ancient Greek times. For example, the god Pan, he was proclaimed dead due to interesting circumstances, we can say. But Nietzsche felt it more like a diagnosis of culture. Even the context in this book is similar to what I just said. He meant it as a proclamation that the belief in God, who used to grant us all our values and would ground them in reality or even in the beyond world, hinterworld, has belief in this God has become unbelievable due to our improved understanding of the world, and thus everything that was built upon this belief in one mainly Christian God is now becoming obsolete. We can no longer believe in it. And it is a famous passage from this book, which I will cite a little. God is dead, God remains dead, and we, as humanity, we have killed him. And how shall we comfort ourselves, all murderers of all murderers? And it is a character of a madman who was searching for God, who died, and everyone knows it, but still believes in those values that God grounded. And Nietzsche then asks if we must become gods to ourselves, so that we can move beyond this old God, so that we can create new values, our own values. Yeah, it is not meant. Just one final note on the death of God. It is not meant that God should be replaced with any other justification or grounding. The death of God, for Nietzsche and for us, should be an opportunity to reevaluate our values, or even to question whether we need some quote-unquote higher idea to ground our beliefs and society in. Yeah. Is it understandable?
Yes. And with that idea of God is dead, let's talk about the consequences, which Nietzsche, I think, implies to in his writings, that since God has died, all the structures, all the things that used to provide us meaning have also collapsed. Yeah. And he basically provides us with a model, or he tries to provide his own model to deal with that. So let's talk about the void, the vacant space that God's death has created, and that is nihilism or meaninglessness. So what is this? What is nihilism, and what is his answer to it?
Yeah, first I will draw some line of thought how he gets to this idea of nihilism. And it is basically implied from what I just said, what I said before, that if first of all, Nietzsche didn't say that everything needs to collapse, as he also thought and saw that what we as humanity have created is not based solely on the idea of God, but he also thought that there are older ideas that even predate the creation of God or even of one unified idea of God. We can think about ancient Greeks, Plato, Aristotle, and others. Pre-Platonics. We can talk about old mages in archaic Greek, in other archaic states, Persia, and others. So, important thing is that as Nietzsche was European, most of European culture during the ages was based on either Plato or Christianity. And now, when the central figure of Christianity, which is God, or God Father, God Son, all those things, if it disappears, just imagine it. There is something that grounds every decision in your life and gives it value. There is something that gives value and meaning to your entire life, to your entire existence, and even to existence after your death. And now it just vanished. It died, even. It was murdered, killed. And what it leads to? Well, the first thing is nihilism and meaninglessness, as you said. Yeah, the loss of meaning. We don't, all of a sudden, we don't have something that gives value and meaning to things in life, but also to life itself. And that basically is nihilism. I've actually looked up the definition, and nihilism in broad or in a simplified philosophical sense is a view that nothing has any intrinsic meaning or any value. For nihilism, nihilism stands for that it always depends on the way things appear to us, and that meaning as like the word, the big meaning of everything, infers some form of designer or persona causa, which after the god's death like loses this designer. We can talk about meaning in things in the light or in relation to human mode of thinking and human abilities. For example, we know the famous French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, who gave the metaphor of scissors. Like, scissors have meaning because before they were created, there was the purpose for having them, which was cutting paper. So they were designed and then made with this purpose in mind, so that they can be sharp on one end, and will be good, nice and ergonomic to hold on the other, so you can put it in your hand and then cut the papers that you need. However, supposing there is no God who would create a human for some other meaning, for something he thought of, then we lack this purpose. And what to do with it? Yeah, we can also talk about the difference between meaning in life and meaning of life.
Yeah, but before that, sorry to cut you out.
Yeah, no
but
problem.
but when but try to think about scissor, right? So it was created only for a purpose, to cut things, right? And it is designed to do that.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that it can only do that one thing. So it has some predestined purpose, but I guess the thing which makes humanity or us beautiful or interesting is this purposelessness, that we were not created with any purpose. As Sartre says, existence precedes essence for humans.
Yeah.
So since the creator, or however we were created, did not have anything in mind, we do not have a purpose, or at least our existence precedes that. So we are absolutely free to do anything that we want. And as Sartre has himself wrote all of his philosophy around just this idea, that this freedom, uh, which can be really terrifying at in some cases. So yeah, just wanted to point it out. And yeah, tell me the difference between meaning in life and meaning of life, because this is something that I think a lot of people get confused by, because they when they talk about meaning in life, they are talking about some metaphysical meaning, that in the big picture, that their existence somehow affects the universe in general. So yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I will firstly follow up on that Sartre existence precedes essence. And yeah, I absolutely agree with you that it is, we can say, empowering, not in a feministic way. Just a little joke of mine. However, yeah, if there is no prepared, interesting. If there is no destiny, no faith that we have to had that we have to comply to, then we are free, as you said, to do absolutely everything. Obviously, not absolutely everything. There are some limitations, and in society there are even more limitations. However, let's stick with it. That there are endless possibilities, and we can do whatever we want. This feeling can be quite empowering because one needs to take grasp of his own life and decide for himself that, oh, but he has the option. He can do anything in his life. And it can be empowering, but it can be also quite stressful and can cause us to freeze or be stuck in the nihilistic space. As if there is no meaning, then why should we do anything? Isn't not being, non-existence, death, better state than this unsure, unstable being? But we can come back to that. Yeah, the difference between meaning in life and meaning of life. This very interesting. Uh, I personally think that meaning in life, rather than meaning of life, meaning in life is quite personal and individual. That one forges it himself or retrieves it from other people, other doctrines, religions, cultures. It can be something like helping people or trying to publish a book, become an athlete and compete on the Olympics, or to save lives as a policeman, a firefighter, to save lives of animals, which I can quite relate to, as my cat is sitting on my desk. However, yeah, meaning of life. It is a rather metaphysical question. Because when we ask what is the meaning of life, we are inferring some prepositions, mainly that life has a meaning, that life ought to have a meaning, that meaning is knowable, that meaning can be found, it will be comprehensible to humans, that it will comfort to human categories of understanding and values and many other things, which is quite interesting. I quite like, as we were talking about Sartre, but I also like Heidegger's definitions of meaning of things. Like, yeah, as we said, scissors have predetermined meaning from their creation. However, we can state such a predetermined meaning only with things that we ourselves create. Life, as life with capital L, universe in general, we can't really know or be sure that there is some intrinsic, some metaphysical, beyond worldly meaning for that. However, it is human nature that we want to organize things, that we want to see purpose in things. It is just human nature, and we want to understand it, because otherwise, what is there left for us? It is chaos, absolute chaos, without any meaning, any direction, that it's any end goal. And it is to accept that we can talk with Kami, the absurdity of life, the absurdity of being, absurdity of existence. It is a very difficult task to bear.
Okay. So how does Nietzsche do it, since you have stated that finding one's purpose is very hard, is a very difficult thing to do for any of us, and Nietzsche is calling us to create our own values, and he gives all of his ideas, that is, such as will to power and all. So can you explain that for me?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is, for me, it is one of the most attractive things in Nietzsche, that he tries to battle this meaninglessness, this nihilism, and absurdity of existence, of life. Most of his thinking, most of his thoughts circle around this idea of value, of creating values. Because, you know, when you proclaim that the God is dead, you need to think of how to what to put in his place, or at least how to bear this thought. And many ideas of Nietzsche's actually deal with this issue. We can go through them. There is, for example, the eternal recurrence, the idea of amor fati, the idea of Übermensch, or Overman, Superman, however one wants to translate it, and the idea of transvaluation of values, or even of self-overcoming. So it really depends what with you want to start.
Let's start with will to power, because that is will to power and eternal recurrence, because these two ideas to me sound very mutually exclusive, because they seem to me as though that they are in complete contrast with each other, but you have told me that they somehow fit in perfect harmony when one thinks about it deeply. So I'd love to understand it.
Yeah, you actually chose one of the hardest one to start with. So nice pick. Yeah, will to power is really hard to understand, and I can see how you see it mutually exclusive with eternal recurrence. I'll try to explain it in the best and mainly in the simplest way possible, what eternal recurrence and then what will to power is. So let's start with the eternal recurrence, because for me, in my very own opinion, it is one of, if not the, Nietzsche's most interesting thought there is. From Nietzsche's own notes, as well as from his book, which is kind of autobiography, Ecce Homo, we know that the first thought of the idea of eternal recurrence, or it is someone called the eternal recurrence of the same, as its full name, came to him in Sils Maria. Sils Maria, a beautiful mountain village in Swiss Alps, somewhere around Lake Sils. You should visit that. It's beautiful, stunning in the mountains, blue skies, a little bit of snow, really beautiful. He was walking around that lake, Lake Sills, and he stumbled upon a pyramid shaped like rock that can still be found today, by the way. And this idea came to him all of a sudden. It was like some biblical, show up, we can say. Uh, in his other books, it was first written in Joyful Science. In book 4, specifically, it's aphorism numbered 341. It is also the penultimate aphorism of the book, followed by the first mention of the character of Zarathustra, before the Joyful Science was supplemented with 5th book. So that's quite interesting, and Zarathustra has a lot of things to do with eternal recurrence. However, I find this aphorism so much striking. So if you would allow me, I would like to cite it in its entirety, and we can discuss it afterwards.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It goes like this. Quote, "The greatest weight. What if, some day or night, a demon were to steal after you in your loneliest loneliness and say to you, 'This life, as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more, and innumerable times more. And there will be nothing new in it, but every pain and every joy and every thought and every sigh and everything unutterably small or great in your life will have to return to you, all in the same succession and sequence. Even this spider and this moonlight between the trees, and even this moment and I myself. The eternal hourglass of existence is turned upside down again and again, and you with it, you speck of dust. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or have you once experienced a tremendous moment when you would have answered him, 'You are a god, and never have I heard anything more divine'? If this thought gained possession of you, it would change you as you are, or perhaps crush you. The question in each and everything: do you desire this once more and innumerable times more? Would this question would lie upon your actions as the greatest weight? Or how well disposed would you have to become to yourself and to life to crave nothing more fervently than this ultimate eternal confirmation and seal?" End quote. Wow, I love this. It's awesome. How do you feel about this? What thoughts does it provoke in you?
This idea is extremely. This idea seems extremely pessimistic for me, and I'd elaborate on this later also, because first of all, tell me one thing: that will I be aware? So let's say that I'm reliving this life that I've already lived. So am I aware of the fact that I've lived this innumerable times, as Nietzsche says?
Yeah, uh, I agree. It is quite pessimistic. And when I tell this idea to people, most of them ask whether they know of the previous lives also. So, good question. I think it doesn't really make difference if you know or you don't, because for Nietzsche, it counts from the moment that you are told this idea. Before you didn't know it in your life that you are living right now. But from the moment you have been told it, it acts, as he says, it is tied upon your actions. And everything you do from then on, you do with the knowledge that it could repeat itself in eternity.
Yeah. So I guess one more thing that is very chilling about it, that we know about the eternal circle of hell, right?
Yeah.
So most people, I think, look, especially in the West, I guess, most people look at it from that lens, that we are stuck in hell or something like that, and we have to relive our best and worst moments again and again. So this, like, for me, I like, most people who know me, they consider me a pessimist. So when I'm thinking about life, I'm just thinking that once I'm dead, I'm dead. There is nothing else. It is just gone. There is just blank. There is complete nothingness. So that gives me a sort of relief also about life, because for some reason uh, non-existence simply seems much better to me. It is much more comfortable for me than existence, and I don't know why that is. I guess it is something coming from the within, but that is why I hate this idea, and not hate this but despise this. And I don't think, like, even if you have your best moments, right, like let's say you are reading a book, you are with someone you love, but the only reason you are loving that moment is because you know that it can end. So let's say you are going on a walk with your girlfriend or with someone you love, and then you are told that you have uh, you have all the time in the world to do this, right? This moment will never end. So that will very soon become a hell for you. That will very soon become a punishment for you. Yeah, so that is the problem, because I don't want any moment to last forever. And I think this is in Homer too, that it goes something like, the gods envy us. They envy us because we are mortal. Because
Yeah.
any moment may be our last. Everything is more beautiful because we are doomed. You will never be lovelier than you are now. We will never be here again. End quote. So this idea that everything that is that is dear to me and that I love will one day cease to exist. This is also a very disturbing idea, to be honest. But an even more disturbing idea is that everything will last forever. And but and that is why I hate that Nietzsche quote and his idea of eternal recurrence, because it is forcing me to relive this life in its entirety, as you said, again and again and again in innumerable times. So uh, I don't know, like, how that can be a positive thing for anyone. So yeah, over
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah. I see where are you coming from to this. I was in the same state also. I can agree with that. I also believe that after we die, there is nothing else. We just die and it's blank, nothing, just end. And I think that Nietzsche thought so also, because he despised the idea of afterlife. And this might be the problem why a lot of people think about him, that he was a proponent of eternal life that keeps on repeating and repeating. Uh, it is one of many ways to interpret the eternal recurrence. Similarly, to I think Buddhism. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Buddhists believe in reincarnation, which is basically a life after life, just in a different form. I think I got that correct. It was Buddhists, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. Okay. However, for Nietzsche, eternal recurrence is not a metaphysical statement. I think it is this concept of eternal recurrence is more fruitful when we look at it from an ethical proposition, as in ethics. I know some academic interpretations. I will start with one from Professor Pavel Kuba. According to him, for Nietzsche, to want or to will something in life means the same as to will it eternally. Yeah, it is about accepting one's decision, one's life, about one will, or about accepting anything that we want to do in our life, every action. And if we then were to accept any of our action truly, to truly accept it, we would have to ask whether we could bear the idea as if that action we want to do would eternally happen again and again ad infinitum. It is ethical question, as you can see. It isn't about actually after you die that you repeat the same life, but about your life going forward, doing only the things that you can imagine that you would do eternally if the eternity was true. Even though it really isn't, but it is like, it is kind of moral, or yeah, it's ethical, but we can say it is moral principle beyond the Christian morality after its fall, you know. This way of interpretation also states that it is Nietzsche's attempt to imprint into being the character of becoming or happening, similarly to Heraclitus. However, this understanding of eternal recurrence could have led to a type of Epicurean fatalism in which we only want to do actions that pleasure us, that are pleasurable, because it is nice to imagine pleasure eternally returning, right? However, it would have bad consequences for the future generations of humanity and for other people in general. So, according to this professor, there should be connection between eternal recurrence and the Overman, the Übermensch being a goal for humanity to strive for in the long term, to not fall into nihilism and Epicureanism, even though it is simply an ideal and nothing more. However, there are also some other interpretation that present a bit different approach. For example, from Dr. Aleš Novák. He thinks that eternal recurrence is not only ethical, but it is also quite metaphysical and ontological thought that deals with the character of time in itself, and it embodies a bit of that Heraclitean spirit of everything being, not just as in stable, or we can say sein from Heidegger, like in one moment stable, not changing, but as something that is dynamic, fleeting. Novak thinks that it is Nietzsche's way of imprinting being a character of becoming, and what differs is his metaphysics of time. Novak postulates that for Nietzsche, time in the light of eternal recurrence becomes united. Past and future are both an aspect of the present moment. The past as what is already realized and thus unchangeable, and what led to this present moment that we are at now. And the future is something that is not yet decided. It is all the potentialities, possibilities that one can do. And time in this sense takes on the form of flux, the permanence of ever-fleeing fluent time. Eternal recurrence thus becomes a binding principle of all human actions that would lead us to, in the end, proclaim, that was life, well, brace thyself one more, let's live it one more time. But according to Novak, according to Nietzsche, we ought to embrace our actions in the light of eternity, to not be ashamed for our actions and of reality itself, but to act in such a way that we would always want to act in the same way. This can also be summed up by the Nietzsche's famous formula of amor fati, love of one's faith. And Novak then claims that a person who can bear the heaviness of eternal recurrence in its entirety can be called an Übermensch, but that's a different type of interpretation, which is also quite interesting. But yeah, to sum it all up, we can think of eternal recurrence as a type of guiding principle. When you want to take some action in your life, you imagine if what you want to do, you want to experience forever and ever, and then do what you would want to experience eternally. I myself try to use this principle in my life. I even got out of a toxic relationship before, thanks to this idea. So yeah, thanks Nietzsche. Um, but yeah, what do you think of it?
Okay, so correct me if I'm getting this right. So basically, this idea of eternal recurrence is a way to filter out the things that we should do. Like we do like most of us do most of the time pretty meaningless things in our life, and Nietzsche is giving us this idea to sort of compel us to choose only the most meaningful tasks, and he is exaggerating it by the effect of eternal recurrence, but uh, that's the motto of his, to make us choose the most meaningful things, right?
Yeah, that's basically it. I can give you an example, like when I'm watching with my partner some series or a movie. I sometimes tend to pick up my phone and I used to play some stupid games to kind of kill the time, as they say. However, after realizing what I was doing, and I said myself, "Oh, this game is full of nonsense, and I don't want, if it was to repeat eternally, I don't want to eternally play this game. So I rather picked up a new habit of learning new German words. So when I'm watching something and I pay partly attention, I tend to do something that gives meaning or is meaningful for me. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the other idea, that is the Ubermensch and the last one. So who is the Ubermensch and who is the last man?
Yeah. The Übermensch, Übermensch as it is in original German, it is quite a controversial topic. It was just a disclaimer for the word. It was misused by Nazis in the Second World War, as they proclaimed that the Nazis were the Übermensch, which is simply not true, and Nietzsche is against this idea. However, even nowadays, a lot of people disagree on what is really Übermensch. Some say that it is a real thing, a real possible character, we can say, that we can achieve, that one can become an Übermensch. For example, Aleš Novák, as I mentioned earlier, says that Übermensch is person that can bear the eternal recurrence in his daily life. There are also others that think that Übermensch is not something attainable by a human, but that it is a next step in human evolution, like some sort of transhumanism that we can mention Darwin, that everything evolves to a higher or better or more sophisticated types of beings, which is also not always true. But this idea of evolution of humanity, some claim that Nietzsche says that it will lead to better type of human, that being the Übermensch. So it will be a new species. However, I don't know. This seems a bit too idealistic. I don't know too much. I'm not really sure about this interpretation. There is also another type of interpretation what the Übermensch is that I partially hold. I'm still not quite certain, and I keep re-evaluating it. And if we imagine that humanity as a whole adopts the idea of eternal recurrence, there could be a problem that whenever we decide something, we choose to do some action that is pleasurable. Excuse me. However, if we only chose those pleasurable things, it could lead to stagnation. Everyone would just be like doing alcohol and drugs, and it's and everything, orgies, etc., etc. It's an exaggeration, yeah, but um, this type of Epicureanism is not good for civilization because it leads to downfall, degeneration, and we can say damnation. And Nietzsche is aware of this problem. So for him, at least I think that he posits the idea of Übermensch as something that can project the goals of humanity into the future, that it acts as something that humanity can strive for, that is beyond this current moment, beyond this current era, something that we can work for and make great works of art, architecture again. In the past, humanity had God to whom we wrote hymns, gospels, built cathedrals, painted incredible paintings. Now we don't have God, but we can have Übermensch, who, let's say, he's a new species, or he is the best, some best kind of humans. We can work as a whole humanity, to achieve this goal of Übermensch becoming real. Yeah, that's one way to interpret it.
So I have a question about this. When Nietzsche says that we have to overcome humanity in a way, forgetting the aphorism from Thus Spoke Zarathustra, but he sincerely says that we have to overcome humanity in a way. And this idea, so the reason why Nietzsche hates, the idea of afterlife is because when somebody is thinking about afterlife, he does not put a lot of thought into this life, because he essentially thinks that, like, even after this life ends, there is something else that I can have.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
but the idea of Ubermensch, I think, does something similar to it, which is quite opposite of his idea, which is in quite, stark contrast with his idea of eternal recurrence, which was essentially, as you said, in a way it should motivate us to do only meaningful things. But when Nietzsche says that this humanity needs to be overcome, so isn't he putting the emphasis of our life somewhere away from our lives, and he's emphasizing that we should all strive towards the Ubermensch, but we will not get there. So why am I doing this? Try to why should I strive to be the Ubermensch when I'm not going to become the Ubermensch?
That's a very interesting question. I can see how it can feel in stark contrast, in opposition to each other, and kind of counterintuitive. But yeah, that's a really interesting question. However, imagine a world where humanity doesn't want to strive for something like the Ibrahimaj or a god or anything. Yeah. Imagine that it lives only in the present moment and doesn't care what the next generation will have, how well will it live, or anything. Yeah, just imagine how it would look like. We would perhaps destroy the nature, do senseless wars, vote for stupid leaders. Nothing else, which is happening right now, by the way. Uh, just a little joke of mine. Now, just imagine that we would only live in this present moment and do nothing more. What would happen with humanity? I think that not just think for Nietzsche, humanity as a whole is quite important. Not all of its parts, but the survival of a species, we could say, is like a prominent aspect of his thought. He doesn't want humanity to go absolutely extinct. However, if we would only consider our own time, like right now, then there is nothing that that pushes us, nothing that pushes us to make the world better or to keep it for future generation. And I think that the idea of Ibrahimaj serves as this idea that will hold humanity for the future, that it can shed light. It's different with Christian ideals that are afterworldly, we can say, or that are beyond our very own lives, is that we are aware of the fact that Ibrahimaj is just a possibility, or that it is a human, all too human ideal, that it is not something beyond humanity, beyond this world, like for example God or any other deity, uh, or it is just something that we created ourselves, and that we all, with our own work with our own lives and with our own struggles, can I don't remember the word right now, that we can help to create.
Interesting.
Yeah, does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It makes
Yeah, and
perfect sense.
does it answer your question, or do you have some other notes you want to add to it?
Not really. You summed it up pretty well, and I guess
I'm happy for that.
I guess I read an article somewhere that Nietzsche implies to this idea that no matter how much humanity grows, essentially we are all human, all to human, that will still have that aspect of humanity, and that can be that is extremely uh, depends on how one thinks that can be extremely good or bad, because in a way it says that we'll never overcome humanity, but it also says that how much doesn't matter how much we grow, we are still a bit human, and that is very interesting, fascinating for me. So let's move on to the next topic.
Yeah,
That
I
is,
just want before we move to the next topic. Yeah, I agree that staying human, all too human, or just staying human in general. I think it's a beautiful thing that we should strive for, to keep our humanity, to not abandon it for something else like coldness of science or the heat of religiosity or anything else, but that we should rather stay human, that we should keep our rationality, our affects in some sort of balance, and just be human. Yeah. So that's all from me. We can move on.
yeah, and how do you think about the ideas of someone like Albert Camus and his the idea of his absurdism, and in what ways is it similar to the nihilism of Nietzsche, and in what ways it is different? Because uh, every couple of days I see a meme on Reddit which is basically trying to juxtapose the two ideas, and essentially they claim that it is the same thing. So how true is that, and does Camus have anything else to add? Does he present a better case than Friedrich Nietzsche, or does he make a worse case? So what do you think about it in general?
Yeah. Uh, I also see these memes often. Yeah, they can be quite fun, especially knowing the background. And I remember that I've read somewhere. I can't find it now, but I know that someone wrote that all the philosophy, all the Western philosophy, all the philosophy led to Nietzsche. Every philosophy before Nietzsche led to him, and every philosophy after him originated from him. I find it quite funny. But in the regarding existentialists or absurdism of Albert Camus, I see a strong inspiration of Nietzsche. I don't know how much Camus read Nietzsche or whether he didn't. I don't know that. But the idea seems quite similar. They have different approaches for sure, but they are similar. Nietzsche says that life has no intrinsic meaning. Thus, we need to create the meaning for ourselves. And for him, it is the eternal recurrence and the idea of the immermensch. For Camus, he comes to the same conclusion that reality or existence is absurd, in the sense that the absurdity of existence is its lack of meaning. However, Camus says that when we know about this lack of meaning, about this absurdity, it frees our existence. Yeah, it frees our existence. We are free to choose for ourselves. We are free to do as we wish to. We are free to do anything. I don't know if he postulates any other ideas of, for example, how we ought to act, what we should do, or something, but they are very similar.
Hmm. Okay, so uh, let's also talk about a bit of the most famous work of Camus, that is his essay, which is quite long for an essay, and the myth of Sisyphus, and
Yeah.
the
Is
opening
he
remark.
happy? Are you
uh,
happy? Have you pushed your boulder today?
I'm trying to push it now, so
Oh,
let's see.
yeah, me too, man.
Yeah, so I'll read the opening or the most famous passage from his essay, that is, there is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is worth living or not amounts to answering the most fundamental questions of philosophy. All the rest, whether or not the world has three dimensions, whether the mind has 9 or 12 categories, comes afterward. These are games. One must first answer. So this, sorry, end quote. So this, first reading it as a teenager, I was quite shocked, and like this is no way to start a this is no way to start an essay, and it seems very gloomy and sad, and but like it is a fascinating read, to be honest. It is probably the best essay I've read yet. But what do you think about him, and also his famous quote that one must imagine Sisyphus happy? So, and I find his uh, logic to be a bit flawed when he claims this. So I want your thoughts on this first, and then I'll comment and say what I think.
Yeah, I find it really striking. And as I said, it is quite, or at least in my opinion, it feels quite similar to Nietzsche's approach, at least to life, and to the idea of meaning and existence and the possibility of existing in this absurd, meaningless life. And I think that Kami has it straight. As you pointed out, the arguments can seem quite irrational or illogical. However, I don't think that's a bad thing because, you know, human existence is not just rationality. We are not only thinking minds. First and foremost, we are living bodies. In, I don't want to say exactly unity, that's a different ontological statement, but we are bodies. We are one bodies. And uh, the way we live in this world is mainly empirical, mainly physical, we can say. However, our minds are set up in a way that we want to have logic, we want to have evidence, we want to have meaning in things, and thus crave the meaning even in life. However, if there is the, we need to seriously consider the possibility that there is no meaning in life. And if we come to face to this and realize our rational background, we can accept this thought in a positive way. It strongly depends on personality, whether you are more inclined to see good things on bad things in this freeing moment or in this meaninglessness, whether you will be happy or sad from that. And both options are possible. However, I myself always imagined in this way Sisyphus happy because, yeah, we are, this irrationality is there. We need to come to accept it, and we can be, in German, it is fröhlich. We can be joyful about it. You know, as I will quote Nietzsche, I couldn't worship a god that doesn't know how to dance. And yeah, I think that for every seriousness there should be a laugh or a dance, and for every dance there should be some seriousness. It all comes hand in hand, and the absence of meaning only gives us the option to laugh if there is no serious meaning. For example, like God, who is all serious and all prohibiting and so weiter and so forth. Uh, you know, now we can dance, we can simply be happy with our existence, and we don't need anything more.
Hmm. It
I
is
can see
quite
yeah, it's quite absurd, I know, but also quite positive and for me empowering.
Yeah, I did not say that it is not positive and empowering, but I just said that it's absurd. That is the best way to put it. And yeah, as you mentioned the quote from Nietzsche that I would believe only in a god who could dance, and when I saw my devil, I found him serious, through profound and solemn. It was the spirit of gravity. Through him, all things fall. So,
Oh,
this is
you
one of my
you remember it
favorite.
better than me.
This is one of my favorite. This is again from the Spoke Zarathustra, and this is probably my favorite quote of Nietzsche, and especially the last part of it when he says that when I saw my devil, I found him serious. So he has, like, whenever somebody thinks about who has not read him, and that is most of the people in today's day and age. So they think of him as a very, gloomy and sad philosopher who is envious of anyone who's happy. But in his writing, he's very funny. He can be extremely enjoyable to read. So, yeah, with that, let's
Yeah,
let's.
yeah. I also know some anecdotes from his life that he was, although his writing, someone sometimes leaves impression that he was really serious, really like strong, strength demanding, like will to power and let's rule everything. Yeah, but you know, I've always heard from academics or biographies of people who met him that he was a really kind and quite shy guy, that he always was very pleasant to be with. Uh, he's we don't know if he smiled. He had a mustache, so it wasn't visible. I know some kids in Sils Maria used to put rocks in his umbrella, so when he would open it, they would fall onto his head, and he would run after them, but in a kind way, in a funny way, sort of. Yeah, it is. He's also very funny. Yeah, there is a lot of irony in his writing, and this idea of God who can laugh, who can dance. Uh, it is a strong metaphor he uses quite frequently and means quite a lot of things. But it also shows that Nietzsche's writing is quite enigmatic and hard to encrypt or decrypt rather, and can be hard to decipher. I once read a quote from, I think it was Professor Koba, I think so, that we should take everything Nietzsche writes seriously, but never literally. And I think that's excellent, and it shows just how much of a metaphors he uses and how he plays with language, with the expectations, how he shifts his points of view and everything. And I think that one should always keep that in mind. Always seriously, but never literally.
Hmm. So, anyway, moving on. Uh, Nietzsche, in one of his letters to his friends, I forgot the letter, whom he was writing the letter to, but he mentions Spinoza, and he says that Spinoza is a sort of, in a way, precursor to Nietzsche. But I, who have not read a lot of philosophical works, had no idea about it, and still I don't know much about it. So, and I don't think that this is talked about a lot in academic circles even. So, it would be great if you could shed some light on it, about the relationship between Nietzsche and Spinoza, and also the uh, philosophical parallels, the ideas that they had, because they also had some very similar ideas too. So yeah, over to you.
Uh, it is quite interesting. Yeah, I know Nietzsche called Spinoza his precursor, which is odd because Nietzsche doesn't usually mention other people as being his precursor. So that's quite a statement from him. However, I have read Spinoza's Ethics. It was a hell. It was a hellish read. It was terrible. I didn't like it at all. Contrary to terrible. I don't recommend it. Or yes, read it so you know what I'm talking about. Uh, and I I know that there is some connection between them, but I never really came to understand what the connection was. I can see it in the way of how they lived, because Nietzsche and Spinoza were both solitary. They were in religious families and then had some problems with it. Nietzsche became atheist, or we could argue whether or not he was atheist, but let's say he was. Spinoza began as a Jew, then converted to Christianity, or the other way around. No, he was Jewish and then converted, and he was quite despised. He was some of his works were put on the Malleus Maleficarum, or the list of heretical books by Catholics. He was almost denounced as a heretic and burned, and he had to move to Netherlands to escape this fate. So I can see some parallels, but from reading Nietzsche, who is all against systematic knowledge, who is against kinda against rationality, or at least against rationality as the only guiding principle. Whereas Spinoza is all about rationality. He wrote down his axioms that he thought were truth about God, and then he made definition. If axiom A equals axiom B, then it implies that definition 3 means that. And I don't know, there is such a difference between them that I can't come to put them into one bag, as they say, to see them as similar. However, there is great video on this topic from Essential Salts, as he does his Nietzsche podcast, and he explained this connection much more better than I ever could, even if you give me 100 years to prepare. So I think that listeners should go and watch that one. It's great. It's a good one.
On a similar note, you told me earlier that you had some disagreements of ideological disagreements with Essential Salts. For people who don't know who he is, um, he hosts a great podcast on Nietzsche, and he has an enormous amount of content just about Nietzsche and uh, comparing him to other thinkers and all. So I highly recommend his podcast for anyone. But um, so you tell me, what were your ideological differences or disagreements with him?
Yeah, I will tell. It's quite funny to hear it as, or to listen to it being ideological difference. Sounds like I'm a propagandist who like Goebbels or someone. No, just joking. No, yeah. Essential Salts and his podcast is a great resource. I highly appreciate his efforts both on Reddit. He used to do really elaborate posts on a Nietzsche subreddit, and then he decided to do a podcast about Nietzsche. And I think it's great. I quite like it, especially the episodes when he describes other people related to Nietzsche, like Emerson, or even the episode on Heraclitus and others. And I think it's great. It's good for people to listen to it and then compare Nietzsche, what they read themselves, and other scholars. However, in some ways, I do disagree with Essential Salt's interpretations. As we both have different background, I've dedicated most of my life, or at least most of my mature life, to studying Nietzsche, reading renowned scholars, and deciding on the interpretations. And I know that he's a musician that tours with a band and started reading Nietzsche on the trips during his free time. And from this point of view, I don't want to say that I prefer scholars to him. He does a great work. And as I mentioned, those connections to other people are great. However, I just don't agree with some of those interpretations. As I was talking about the episode on Heraclitus, and I incidentally also, since I know a thing or two about Heraclitus, as I read him in original Greek. I didn't understand much, but I tried, trust me. I came to a lot of different things in the interpretation, but also in the interpretation of Nietzsche's of Heraclitus and some other things. His views on eternal recurrence and Ibermensch, for me, they serve as a good contrast to my own thoughts. And if I were to recommend his channel to anyone, I would recommend it thus, as a tool, as other opinion that can enhance your own. Yeah, so that's basically the disagreement that I have with him. But he's great, and I've watched a lot of his episode. I don't know which one I ended at. I know that his readings of the books like Beyond Good and Evil, I think also The Joyful Science and others, it's great. It's nice to hear someone else's interpretations of the words you can see yourself. But some of the metaphors I would interpret in other way. On some I agree with him, and yeah, it would be nice talking to him as he's well read. So yeah, that's it. He's a great guy. I hope he continues and he's well.
Hmm. So, again on a similar note, Nietzsche was a musician, or at least he tried to be a musician, and Essential, Essential Arts, the guy who hosts the Nietzsche podcast, he is also a musician. And you have told me that you also play some instruments.
Yeah,
And
incidentally.
yeah, and I, for one, I'm trying to learn the guitar. I really suck at it right now, but I hope in the future at a time
The
able
suck,
to.
the sucking is part of the process of learning, so it's valuable experience. So keep at it.
Yeah, I hope I can unsuck at it. So anyway, but and also you have written a great article on the philosophical musicality, or the something like that, the philosophical musicality of Nietzsche, right?
Yeah, right.
So can you tell me a bit about what that is? Because I tried to read it, I read a couple of pages, I understood some of it, but most of it was too tough for me. So can you break it down for me and the listeners a bit? And
Yeah,
like, what do
yeah,
you mean by, and also what do you mean by the musicality in philosophy? Like, what does that even mean?
yeah. Thank you for the advertisement. Yeah, I've been working on this article for a lot of time. To give some context, as you mentioned, Nietzsche not only tried, but he was quite a good musician. He was learning piano and playing piano from from young years, and from what we know, what are some notes of his family members, even from Wagner himself. He was quite good at it. He was good at improvising, at playing sheet music, etc. So yeah, he was quite good. He wanted to be a composer. He wanted to compose his own music, and that is where was the problem, because he composed some pieces for piano and violin, for piano and voice as for a singer, and he even wrote one piece for orchestra. And people disagree on whether it is good or bad. I myself quite like that music, most of it. Some of it is quite heavy and strange. Some of it is quite nice, and I enjoy it. And I think what to mention. He was friends with Wagner and probably also knew Franz Liszt, the famous pianist. But Wagner, he is this giant of romantic classical music. And he was well known over Germany and in Europe, everywhere. And Nietzsche quite adored him, maybe even as a father figure. So that's interesting. And one time he wrote a piece and presented to Wagner, and Wagner didn't like it. Didn't like it at all. And from then on, Nietzsche stopped dreaming about becoming a famous composer. So that's one way to end to smash someone's dreams. Yeah, thank you, Wagner. Perhaps he would have written an opera or something like that, symphony. However, Nietzsche himself studied music a lot, played music a lot. Even when he went mad, he still played piano when he could. People would hear Bizet's Carmen or Wagner's Tristan und Isolde and other operas, and he was really good. And here comes my idea of philosophical musicality, which is interesting. I think that Nietzsche never gave up on music or on writing music entirely, and that he rather transformed this dream of his, which was composing music, and he transformed it into writing. As we know, or at least I found out, Greeks and ancient Greek was quite lyrical language, and it was very important to know the melody that one created when speaking in ancient Greek and when reading ancient Greek. And Nietzsche's background as philologist, he observed that also, that it was important from Greeks, both with the idea of music, as in the gods of Apollo and Dionysus. We can talk about that later, but I think that Nietzsche himself tried to encapsulate the power of music within words and within books he wrote. You have read some Nietzsche, so you can surely agree with me that a lot of his sentences, his paragraphs, even books, entire books, are so enchanting when one looks on the flow of language. In the original, it's on a whole another level. His use of pauses, of commas, and other articles, it's just breathtaking. And yeah, for me, I think that it wasn't only in the style of his writing, but also in the conception of his works. that he tried to encapsulate the power of music. For example, you know that, or people should know that symphony is composed from not sentences, from those parts. They are
Phrases.
not just phrases, but the first movements, like first movement of symphony, second movement, third movement, fourth movement, etc. And I think that Nietzsche tried to copy or mimic this when he was writing his Zarathustra. And I took a look on Thus Spoke Zarathustra and some other books, and found out that if you look on them as on symphonies, that they make a lot of sense and open up new interpretations. For example, if we regard Book 1 of Zarathustra as first movement of symphony, which follows a sonata form, which is a form of musical structure that is used in sonatas, then we can take the example of, the transfigurations, the lion, the baby, and the camel. Most people, when interpreting this, see it detached from the rest of the book, that it is just Nietzsche's thought that one is a camel, then he becomes lion, and then he can become baby who can create its own values. However, if we look on this passage in the optic, or through the optic of musicality or philosophical musicality, as I coined the term, we can see that it is like a prelude or overtune to the entire first book of Zarathustra, and says that first few parts of the book are written as if camel said them. The middle parts are wrote as if a lion wrote it, and the last part is as if baby wrote it. And it makes a lot of sense, and you can even see that the ideas he writes about are like musical phrases. They interlude with each other, they shift, and when one knows a bit about music theory, then he can follow the musical structure in these words, and you can see deeper meaning within them. That is one way to look at it. I also found that this aspect of musical form can be found in some other of his books. For example, in The Twilight of the Idols, or even I think it is in Ecce Homo. I hope I will find it in some other books of his. But yeah, Twilight of the Idols, both with Ecce Homo, can be regarded as sonata. And I can send you some graphs later that show how it would be structured and how the meaning would shift according to this structure. So yeah, that's basically it. Philosophical musicality in this sense equals Nietzsche's writing as if it was music, although it is literature. Yeah.
This probably does not sense to anyone who has not read Nietzsche. So I'll just quote quote a few things that will. This will probably give you an idea of what Nietzsche is about and how wonderful all of his quotes are, and especially his aphorisms. They are just like you can never get tired of reading them.
Yeah,
And
that's
like
true.
this is one of my favorite ones. I'm not sure from where does it come, but it essentially goes something like, I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset that from now on I can't believe you. And like
Yeah.
this is such a this is plain pure this is pure poetry. Like I cannot even This is, I cannot even talk about it. Like, we can go on for hours just about this quote. And again, one of my favorite ones is, and those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. So
Yeah. Yeah,
this
it's
is
all really poetic and lyrical, and Nietzsche also sometimes includes his own poems in his books, which is even more enchanting. And it paints this picture of not just a philosopher, but also of a poet, of a writer, great writer of literature who just moves between these epic or really beautiful pictures painted with just words. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I have a lot of favorite quotes from Nietzsche, and I think that Nietzsche destroyed my taste in books and in literature because I can't go a long time reading other books apart without coming back to Nietzsche. I can't stand other writers. He just writes so well. I need to always come back to him as to a healing tool, as a convalescent.
hmm. So would you like to say some of your favorite quotes of Nietzsche?
Oh yeah, sure, no problem. I like without music, life would be a mistake. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
One can see how Nietzsche liked music. I also like music. I'm also a musician, so it means a lot to me. Or another quote that I like is, "What is done out of love always happens beyond good and evil."
Ah,
Yeah,
I hadn't heard this one, but yeah,
I
nice.
I like it so much in original German, if I may.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Was aus Liebe getan wird, geschieht immer jenseits von Gut und Böse. And I mean, that's so nice.
I could not understand the word you
Yeah,
said, but it felt really nice.
yeah. He has so much quotes that one can quote from him. Yeah, it's really interesting. However, it is also a bit of a problem with Nietzsche literature. Um, you know, his style is present. He's writing in aphorisms, which are, for those who don't know, are those small fragments of his thought that can be one sentence long or even a few pages long. It always depends. They can just be one small or middle length paragraph. And it is quite easy to take some of his aphorisms, knit them together, and make them so that they support your opinion. However, with it, you disregard the other things Nietzsche wrote. So it makes him quite easy to disinterpret, but it also makes him seem contradictory to himself, and not a lot of people have a clear consensus on Nietzsche and Nietzsche's writing, even among scholars.
Hmm. Why do you think that is? Because he writes in such an open-ended way, or is it just people trying to use him to peddle their own narratives? And I'd like to like talk about Jordan Peterson here for a moment because he is, I mean, I've he was the first person whose lectures I watched on Nietzsche, and I found like in retrospect they seem like incredibly tainted in a way because he tries to paint a picture of Nietzsche as this guy who was very gloomy and sad about the meaning crisis that we are falling into. But when one reads Nietzsche, it is exactly the opposite thing, that he's to some extent even embracing the meaninglessness and calling us to create our own meaning. And for some reason, I don't think Jordan Peterson misses this. From what I understand, he intentionally misinterprets him just to peddle his own Christian narrative. And I don't necessarily have a problem with like somebody peddling his own narrative, but don't don't like distort other thinkers just to support your claims. So, uh, yeah, over to you.
Yeah, it's a real problem, especially with Nietzsche. One thing is that when one wants to push his or her, basically their own agenda or ideology, they will find a way to misinterpret almost every author to suit their own needs. So it's quite hard to protect any author from that, especially Nietzsche. But yeah, you mentioned Jordan Peterson, and he has very, very, and I mean very, with capital V, tainted view of Nietzsche. He brutally misinterprets it. One quote from him that was uh, brutally misinterpreted is about woman, or that truth is a woman and likes only a warrior. And his entire lecture on that, it's just pure nonsense. I'm gonna be political, and it's just yeah, it's whole nonsense. And he keeps doing it over and over again, and I can't stand him really. However, um, problem with interpreting Nietzsche and in a quote unquote correct way is a problem that fully comes down to the way Nietzsche presents his ideas, and there are two main aspects to it. First one comes down to Nietzsche using aphoristic style of writing, as I already mentioned, because he is presenting a huge variety of ideas, and he's not presenting them in a structured way. So it makes it hard to interpret what Nietzsche really, in quotations, meant. And there are a few reasons why he used aphorisms. It was his intention, most probably, but we can see why, because one of the reasons is what I call ambivalence or duplicity. See, coming down to Nietzsche's early thoughts from the time of the birth of tragedy, uh, Nietzsche says that the nature of the world is chaos, or that it is chaotic in the sense of Dionysian chaos. But when humans are confronted with this terrible and intoxicating, but therefore true chaos of events, one cannot live without the support of a non-truthfully solid form of appearance. Being close to this Dionysian chaos endangers human life because of our need of knowledge and truth that cannot be attained. It is, I think, that is also one quote of Nietzsche, that truth is like Greek wine, that without its dilution in water, one cannot drink it. And Nietzsche tries to solve this problem, and it is, or there can be like a few ways to believe in this way. One of those ways is theoretical optimism, which is the root of epistemic systems that present us with so-called quote unquote true knowledge. Excuse me. But Nietzsche discovered that all of those epistemological systems are based in some sort of morality. Moral systems, according to Nietzsche, believe in good in itself and in bad in itself, in something intrinsic good and intrinsic badness, we can say. And that all truths and knowledge are good, while appearance, deception is bad. And for most of the time, this teaching of moralities was good because it it helped us orient ourselves in the world where everything tried to eat us, where there was death everywhere and everything. But Nietzsche argues that this leads to denoting half of our world, of reality, as being unwanted because it is quote unquote bad. You see, we need to believe in truth, not truth itself. Which is from Nietzsche's notes from the year 72 or 73, I don't know exactly. You see that we need to believe in truth, that we don't need truth by itself. Something similar kind to moral epistemological system is Kant's belief in thinking itself. It is something transcendental. It believes in something beyond us, something that oversteps us, but is in its nature quote unquote good, which is just an extension of Christian values, where God is eternally good, eternally well, and everything bad comes from Satan or from the absence of God. But Nietzsche thinks that mere appearance is not something bad in itself, and rather that it is necessary condition of life, and that we need those reliable, permanent, and identical forms on which we can rely, even though they are just linguistic schemes and thus untrue, we can say. In this sense, the senseful world is just a human creation. Thus, Nietzsche is close to pragmatism, but while from the point of view of pragmatism, practically verified utility is indeed both the definition and the basic criteria of truth, Nietzsche does not cease to emphasize that these useful and necessary truths are illusions. And the fact that we can't live without schematizations and these so-called truths doesn't prove their validity. Nietzsche thus thinks that concepts of truth and untruth are inextricably linked together, and that neither aspect is self-contained, which is also partially depicted in his Dionysian and Apollonian scheme. Dionysian Apollonian scheme. For Nietzsche, the interdependence of truth as something apparent and the untruth as something hidden is nothing that can be thought of at once. And this gives rise to phenomenological exploration as Martin Heidegger and others did later. But this conflict between truth and untruth is not something bad per se. To quote Nietzsche, we are temporarily in need of blindness and must leave certain articles of faith and errors untouched in us, as long as they keep us alive. We must be unscrupulous in regard to truth and error as long as life is concerned, precisely so that we can then consume life again in the service of truth and intellectual consciousness. This is our ebb and flow, the energy of our contraction and expansion. Thus, we stand between knowable untruth and unknowable truth, or between openness and hiddenness of the world, both of which, generally speaking, can act as truth on untruth. They both can transfigure into each other, one arising from the other. What cannot become untruth also cannot become truth in this sense. And thus we cannot separate truth from untruth without and thus leaving our judgments to pure aesthetical valuation. Thus, Nietzsche's truth is truth only insofar as it has to be told and presented, and is therefore naturally in danger of being confused with the common banal inside, we can say that everything has two sides, or that everything is a bit true and a bit false. If Nietzsche's position is let's call it truth, it is truth of a particular position. Nietzsche's relation to truth is not contradictory, but it is essentially unified because it is twofold. It is not a metaphysical conception of truth, because that would presuppose a search for a kind of pure knowledge motivated by the idea that it is enough to exclude disturbing falseness or subjective elements in order to reveal so-called objective knowledge. Here we come to Nietzsche's concept of the interpretative character of our experience or of being in general. Due to this, Nietzsche's view of nature, of truth, and of the world, we abandon the notion of knowledge as an undistorted representation and unclouded image of self-existent being. Due to the twofold or ambivalent nature of our worldview, we are also co-creating the reality that we are discovering. That is because any sense must be a sense to someone. A sense without observer is nonsense. For Nietzsche, all knowledge is a relationship to a state, defined by presupposition and conditions that can be thematized. Any truth is gradually grasped in this way. It becomes part of networks of interrelations. Thus, to know means to enter into a relationship or to be continued and to condition, to answer the question of what a certain being means to us. For Nietzsche, perspectivity implies the constant presence of untruth and refers not only to the whole field of reasoning, but to the phenomenon of life as such. If one understands one's perspective as being a perspective, then one is at least potentially already critical and ready to overstep one's own stance, and is open to the possibility that one's present perspective will prove illusory. Here then, it is implied that ambivalence, it is a perspective existing as a tension between a reality grasped in a certain way and a reality that escapes that grasp. We thus have nothing but perspectives at our disposals, but neither do we need anything else. The problematic nature of perspectivity here is only internal. It forces us to consider whether what a given perspective fails to grasp is more important than what it does grasp. For in that case, our perspective no longer grasps the reality and becomes an illusion. And even in this situation, Nietzsche's position is merely a perspective of the situation, and he himself understands it as interpretative. And he then coins the term will to power, which we can come back later. Because for Nietzsche to capture this essence of ambivalence, he uses aphorisms. By doing so, he can show first perspective on some issue in one aphorism, and then he can say the exact opposite in the second aphorism, it being the second perspective. And if we were to compare these two views to each other, they would appear contradicting to each other when viewed at once, but they aren't really. By us changing position from which we interpret, we can encompass the picture more fully. We could say that one needs to see both sides of the issue to truly understand it. And that is what Nietzsche does. However, it is also why he is so misunderstood, so misinterpreted, and misused by various opposing factions. I hope I didn't bore you to death with that long explanation, but it was quite needed to capture the essence of Nietzsche's thought. You see, a quick summary. When there is a problem, we cannot look at it from one side. like when observing a picture from front, but it is rather like observing a 3D object. We need to change our position around the object to fully observe it, and only then we get a fuller picture.
First of all, you did not bore me at all. That is very interesting.
Thank you.
And and upon that, can you elaborate a bit about will to power? Because that is still something that I'm not very sure about. How does it work? And also, like when Nietzsche talks about quote unquote the higher men and their morality, and so how is that morality different from the current morality that we have? And the herd morality is the term that he uses for it. So yeah. So first of all, let's start with will to power.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually mentioned will to power earlier, and we only just got to it, which is quite good because we have some understanding now of other of Nietzsche's ideas, which are crucial to will to power. Because will to power, or die Wille zur Macht, as it is in original German, it is one of the most complex of Nietzsche's ideas. And many famous authors and philosophers have tried to understand it, to decipher it, really. And some with very mixed results. For example, Martin Heidegger is an example of a failed interpretation because he claims that power in will to power is simply a brute physical force and nothing more. I'm being simplistic here, but it is basically that, and it's not a correct interpretation nowadays, and in my own eyes. So, what is it? It is. I should note that there exists a book called Will to Power. It is usually sold in English-speaking world that I know. But it actually isn't book published by Nietzsche. It isn't even book that he wanted to write. He wanted, no, don't get me wrong. He wanted to write a book, his magnum opus, that was supposed to be called A Will to Power. It would be an attempt to reevaluate all values, but this book was never realized. Nietzsche used some notes he took on will to power in his other books, in Twilight of the Idols and in the Antichrist. However, what is being sold as will to power are his notes that he wrote in between those books, in between the times, and they were never meant to be published. So it is quite difficult to interpret them, as sometimes, at least when I take or write down my notes, I don't mean all of them. For example, I can write something about the supremacy of one group, but it is an example to which I want to come back and, for example, criticize it or build arguments against it. So we can't be really certain whether Nietzsche meant everything in his notes literally. And thus it makes it quite difficult to interpret. But, well, that's enough history. Let's talk ideas. The term will to power is a very specific way of how Nietzsche operates with the terms of power or strength and weakness. However, it is not a unified concept because Nietzsche usually changed his views and his own thinking shifted. So rather, it is a tension of meaning that keeps escalating, similarly as in writings of Heraclitus. So there still is one ground we can point to, and this is very important, and I can stress this enough, what one needs to know. Will to power can only manifest itself through resistance. This means that we can experience will or will to power only as its effects on something else, on some different power, different will, different entity whatsoever. Thus, we can quickly see how complex will to power is. It is always a connection. It is connected. It is connected with its resistance. It is a relation, the proportion of forces or quantum of power, and it can be determined by the action which it exercises and upon which it exercises it on. We can also see that it is quite different to traditional moral systems, which will to power is answer to. While those moral systems try to withhold the second quantum and try to act as the only acting force, you see, like morality and what is good in morality is the only thing that matters and nothing bad really exists and we don't have to care about it. Nietzsche says that if will to power is quote unquote good, and he doesn't say that, but let's, for the sake of example, if will to power is something good, then we cannot think about it without its opposition, without what it resists to. It cannot exist without its opposition, and that is also really important to know. Just note that we don't operate with dual opposites or exact opposites, and Nietzsche also doesn't. It is not a similar one-to-one quotient, one-to-one relation. Also note that when I say power, it doesn't simply mean physical power. Will to power can manifest itself as someone's opinion or statement. Every opinion in this way, every statement and every actions are willings. They are willing of something. And in that sense, it is an act of power which wants something. This willing of something is very, very important because Nietzsche says that if power is to arise, it must be able to want what it wants, but also its opposite against which it wills it. In other words, the will can want what it simultaneously rejects as its possibility. Let's show it on another example. Imagine a knight with a great sword, shield, and in a shining armor. Yeah, just imagine that. Now, this knight wants to become a great warrior, to be honored and everything. So let's ask a question. How does he achieve that? He could slay some unarmed peasants, yeah, or some, horses or whatever. But I think that we both can agree on that it would not make him great. However, if he was to search for some other warrior of his strength, of enemy with similar or greater capabilities, and then duel with him, and eventually overcome him, that would make him truly great. In this sense, will to power wants a great opponent, because where the opposition diminishes, power diminishes also. This is what is in Nietzsche's thought weakness. It can mean two things. Weakness is either inability to put up sufficient resistance, but weakness is also the inability to allow sufficient resistance. And this once again shows that will to power relies on the situation and on the connection it finds itself in. We can list some more examples that will help. I personally like the metaphor of unity and disunity or disjointment. Will to power wants unity everywhere where there is a lack of unity, where there is disunity. However, if this will to unity, quote unquote, would lead to too much unity. And by that I mean where everything and everyone would basically be the same, too much united, and become a herd. Then the will to power would transform itself, and it becomes will to disunity, will to individuality. Or I can think of another example. We can pose uh, the will to self-preservation. When one faces circumstances that endanger his or her own existence, will to power takes on the form of will to self-preservation. However, when such conditions cease to exist and one gets into a comfortable state of being, will to power transforms into a creative force, a force of self-overcoming, force of growth. But to grow means that one needs to open himself to new, alien, and unknown with capital U. This almost Darwinian self-preservation is simply the willing of itself, like it wills itself. But growing cannot stay within itself. It wants to open itself up to the risk, to new things. But when opening itself up, it risks that it would also lead to one's demise. And Nietzsche thus determines power of each will by its ability to transform its opposite into its benefit. So, yeah, that's will to power, and I hope it is now clearer for you, and that you and your listeners understand it more clearly now.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, so let's also talk a bit about the morality, and after that we'll wrap up this because it has been already like almost 2.5 hours. So let's talk a bit about the different kinds of morality that Nietzsche talks about, and then we'll talk about some of our favorite quotes from Nietzsche, and then we'll end up the podcast. So yeah, over to you.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't even realize how long we have been talking already. The time flies by when you are having fun, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So morality and moral systems. Yeah, I think that uh, it is one of the most read books from Nietzsche. The genealogy of morals. It is quite easy book to start with Nietzsche, with reading Nietzsche, because apart from unlike his other books, it is written as an essay, quite long essay, I must add, but it is not fragmented. There is one starting thought, and every other statement, every other thought linearly follows the previous ones, and it all moves to one end. And I I should note that the genealogy of morals is, as it's an essay, it is Nietzsche doesn't say that what he writes there is facts or that they are facts. It is a possibility, it is his own thinking, it's a proposition that can or cannot be true. Now, what he writes in there is quite interesting. Genealogy of morals or of morality. Genealogy is like the study of how things change over generations, simply said. And Nietzsche thus tries to study how moral systems changed over time. And according to his background in philology and in ancient Greek texts, he posits the possibility that their morality that they had was different than to what we have nowadays. Basically, and we can see that in Homer's writing in Iliad and Odyssey. Their morals were based on heroes, on higher castes of people, on those who were at the power. We can see it even in the structure of polis, where there were like the politicians and the wealthy men on top. In the middle, there were working class or citizens that couldn't vote, and underneath all of that, there were the slaves. And basically, who was on the top was the big boss, we could say nowadays. He was the ruler, and whatever he said was the law. And thus, it is Nietzsche's thought or proposition that the first morality was I can't remember the word right now. Master's morality. That what they found good, as in everything that they did, was good. Being wealthy was good, being strong was good, etc., etc. However, the masters weren't the majority in population. The majority were the slaves. And Nietzsche posits a possibility that over some time, the slaves didn't like their masters, because masters were strong and strong men good. However, slaves were weak and thus they were bad. So they tried to come up with a new morality that was a simple inversion of master's morality, and coined this term as slave morality. Basically, it meant that if a master said, I'm wealthy and to be wealthy is good, then slave said, master said, I'm wealthy, being wealthy is good, however, being poor is bad. Then a slave who wanted to invert this came and said, no, I'm not poor. I just don't need all the material wealth, and I'm pious in this way. Thus, being poor is actually good, and being wealthy is bad. And Nietzsche posits the possibility that this reevaluation of morality, we can call it like that, actually resonated strongly with Christianity. And if you look into the Christian teachings, it is all about how the poor ones are the good ones, and how those who have wealth, who are strong, etc., who are the bad ones. And claims that this slave morality, due to its strength in numbers, became the leading morality in the world, and actually corrupted the society. And we can see that in history, how Christianity spread and their ideas spread, that it kind of correlates together. And there comes the problem, because this morality was based on God, who loved the poor, and now Nietzsche said that God is dead, and we've already talked about it. And that is one point of Nietzsche's critique of morality, that there is God and how it came to power. However, there is also another problem Nietzsche has with moral systems, and I already hinted on that while talking about the will to power. As morality divides our world into two sides, into good and into bad, or rather we should say good and evil. Nietzsche says that this difference, we could say, is in itself false, that it is somewhat bad, because if I take this glass of water that I have by myself, we cannot say that it is good or evil intrinsically, metaphysically. And when there is no God that grounds the values of good and evil, then the notion of evil becomes obsolete and we need to get rid of it. That is why he wrote Beyond Good and Evil. In his book, it is quite packed with ideas, and he examines this problem that there isn't good and evil in opposition, but there is good and bad, meaning in relation to us, and that whatever is good also depends on its opposition in the quote-unquote bad thing, and that we cannot think about the thing as it is in terms of only good or only bad, because that's unjust. It's injustice. But also, we cannot think about the world in these terms, because that would discriminate half of the experiences as bad as unwanted, even though they are the realities of world that and realities of life that we can't live without, or that we cannot like not experience. For example, depression. I know that psychiatric depression is a disease, it's a bad thing, and I know that. However, it isn't bad in itself. It isn't something evil. It is a reality of life. And this is a first step on accepting life, even in its bad times, we can say. Yeah. I think I mentioned everything I wanted to. Yeah, also on a little bit of a fun note, first person in history who actually preached the difference between good and evil was ancient prophet in Persia, Zoroaster or Zarathustra or Zarathustra. And he was this priest, high priest of Zoroastrism. And Nietzsche despised his thought of good and evil, and thus chose the character of Zarathustra to be the one who destroys this duality of morality in his book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. So he would end the circle, which is quite interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that is very Nietzschean.
Yeah.
Because he often does these kind of things.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Actually, I want to talk about Beyond Good and Evil a bit more, but I have not read it completely yet, and we also don't have the time right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we will definitely schedule some other time to talk about
Yeah,
it.
sure.
And
That would be
let's,
great.
yeah, definitely, because that is one of my favorite books of all time. When he says, like in the opening remarks, when he says that maybe truth is a woman and she's
Yeah, I
despising
know.
us.
Yeah,
So
it's if I may just this quote, it's very interesting because Jordan
go
Peterson
on.
did so much evil to this quote, but and how Nietzsche works with the idea of truth being a woman depends on what he writes next, because he writes that all the philosophers must have been bad lovers when trying to approach a truth woman, because they tried to obtain truth with logic and rationality. But I myself and many others, I think you too, can agree that if you want to get a girlfriend or a wife, you don't go to her and list down arguments or why she should be with you. No, you need to like physically attract her, enchant her or something. And it's like his little game, Nietzsche, little game of Nietzsche's irony. It's a great joke, but let's just think about the possibility that all those philosophers tried to approach it in a bad way. that truth is a woman and we need to love her and try to seduce her even. And, I find it quite funny just thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely. I
Yeah.
definitely understand what you're saying, and like those people who have read even a little bit of Nietzsche's writing, or even Beyond Good and Evil, will understand what we are talking about.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, but we will definitely have another session just about this, just about Beyond Good and Evil and some other ideas that we have not been able to talk about
Yeah,
in
sure.
this one.
I would be glad to come again because this was a really interesting experience for me and I really enjoyed it. And it was quite Nietzschean to say. We were talking almost entirely about Nietzsche, and we can anytime talk about other ideas, other thoughts, other philosophers even. And yeah, I would quite enjoy that.
Yeah, definitely. So if you have some more of your favorite Nietzsche quotes, go ahead and let's try to wrap it up now.
Well, I like the one about music, this one about good and evil, as I said already. I actually like some of his poems. They are quite nice. I don't know them in English, unfortunately, but I can try to interpret them or somewhat similarly. Like it goes something like this. I know where my lives begin, uh, and as a flame I eat upon myself. He then continues to say, like, I I burn what I touch, and from what I come off turns to dust. Surely I must be a flame. And in German and even in my own Czech translations, it's so nice. It flows so nicely and in kind of encapsulates the spirit of Nietzsche and of his writings. Yeah. What's your
Okay.
favorite quote?
Like there are so many that I cannot pick one, but if I had to
Yeah.
pick one, this would be probably it, that the thought of suicide is a great consolation. By means of it, one gets through many a dark night. And this is for me especially. This has been very true on a personal level, and
Yeah, for me too.
so yeah, and like uh, I don't know if you have read the likes of Emil Cioran, but
I haven't, unfortunately.
yeah, and he was also greatly influenced by Nietzsche, and I think he is considered the most pessimistic philosopher of the 20th century, if I'm not wrong. And he has he has another quote which goes something like, "We should not commit suicide because one." Basically, he says one should never kill himself because we always kill ourselves too late. So it is always too late to commit a suicide. So you should never. So yeah, this, like, there is
Yeah.
something very like apart from the will to power and all the wonderful ideas that Nietzsche had, he also had a very dark and melancholic side of his, which
Yeah.
is just as wonderful. And I think he also has a quote, something which goes like, "I am a forest and a night of dark trees, but he who is it not afraid of my darkness will find banks full of roses uh, under my
Yeah.
cypresses," or something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
he
it's nice
realizes
indeed.
this. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the fact, yeah, go on.
Yeah, he can get quite dark and melancholic. In this way, I always remember that quote about the abyss. The who battles with monsters, beware not to turn into one. And if you stare too long into the abyss,
Abyss.
yeah, be aware
Yeah.
that the abyss doesn't stare back into you,
Yeah,
which is quite
definitely.
dark. Yeah,
Yeah, but also true at the same time. So
indeed. But there are just so many quotes from Nietzsche that one can't do justice to pick just one or 10 or 100. I mean, they are all great. I try to keep them in my mind, at least the idea of eternal recurrence, and act in accordance to that. That imagine if what you are doing would repeat ad infinitum, and act upon that. So yeah,
yeah, with that thought, let it be the end of it, and I hope that we get together innumerable number of times again and again to talk about Nietzsche and
yeah,
more
I hope so
philosophers.
also. Yeah, hopefully.
So yeah, okay.